Hi, this week I chose to look at the status of Puerto Rico, really the legal status of Puerto Rico and its citizens and how it's changed over time. And I looked at the America History and Life with Full Text database to find three sources on this subject. The first source that I found was Puerto Rico Tres Opciones, and really this was a source about the three options of Puerto Rico. And this author, Maria Patricia Pensada Ladice, she looks at newspapers as well as the Constitution and some other secondary sources, many of which were by Emilio Garcia. And she traces the history and presents an overview of the current situation of Puerto Rico and really examines the debate that's going on. And in this article, she goes over the history of the Associated Free State, and she covers the post-World War II condition and changes that happened in Puerto Rico. And she talks about the industrialization of Puerto Rico to the advantage of the United States and Puerto Rico. She includes a lot of economic and political information about the debate that's happening between these three options. Should their status become that of a state? Should they become independent? Or should there be some third status, maybe no change at all? She concludes that the values of the United States are present on the island, and it is clear that they desire statehood, even though she doesn't come out on and take a stance on one of those three things. The second article I found was mapping the contours of the history of the extension of U.S. citizenship to Puerto Rico, 1889 to present. And in this source, Charles Ventador Santiago uses court cases and a lot of legislation, as well as some primary sources on like journals on legislation and several more books, and he traces the status of Puerto Rico from the time it joins the United States in 1898 to current day, and he examines the relevant court cases and legislation for the legal changes that happened, and he talks about the issues that were created because of these changing statuses of the citizenship of Puerto Ricans. In this, he talks about both that debate that we discussed earlier in that last article and kind of the implications of if Puerto Rico is inside of or outside of the United States. And the answer seems to be both whenever it's convenient to the U.S. Congress. And he talks about the difference between the status of Puerto Rican-born persons and Spanish-born persons on the island after the Treaty of Paris that ends the Spanish-American War. In conclusion, he talks about how the doctrines of territorial incorporation made Puerto Rico both inside and outside of the United States. And the last article took a look at mostly economic sources and some International Labor Office data, and goes through and states the claim that Puerto Rico is a model for economic development. They describe the current economic standing of Puerto Rico, and this article, it's important to keep in mind, is actually a really early article from the late 60s. And in it, it talks about the current data on Puerto Rico's development and how well they're doing and how the United States has benefited the island. But it also exhibits U.S. attitudes towards Puerto Rico in general and its role in the world. And it refers to those political debates very minimally, which is very telling because during this time period, many Puerto Ricans say there's like a whole revolution going on in an independence movement. In conclusion, in this article, White discusses how Puerto Rico is only a partial model for economic progress because they have not made significant successes. And here is my bibliography. And because the topic of a lot of the sources for this week was genealogy, I thought I might show off my family's monstrosity. This is a genealogy that has been created by my family over several generations, and I am supposed to digitize it.